studies or MAPS, um, said he hoped that these sorts of LSD and psilocybin and drugs would be available by prescription by 2021. So they apparently are coming. So Michael Pollan, after writing that article back a few years ago, decided to write an entire book in which he himself takes these drugs, and he relates his personal story as well as a lot of really good information about the truth about psychedelics, what they can do, what they can't do, what these trials have shown. And he states that he came across this article in the journal Psychopharmacology that had the title, "Psilocybin can occasion mystical type experiences having substantial and sustained personal meaning and spiritual significance." And this startled him because, as you might expect, for a scientist or a sort of a person who doesn't have a particular spiritual blend, but particularly for scientists and researchers, to come across the words mystical, spiritual, and meaning from a peer-reviewed science article on research is a bit intriguing, to say the least. So what this is showing is that, and it's what we talk about, and I've been talking about on this show since the beginning of the show, is how our science is bringing us back to our mystical understandings, and that two worlds that people have grown accustomed to think are irreconcilable, spirituality and science, are absolutely not so, and in fact are more alike in many ways than they are different in certain ways. I think what gets in the middle of it for a lot of people is the co-opting that many religions do of our own spirituality. And so much religious dogma, much religious ideology gets layered on top of the experience of spirituality, which has none of that. The spiritual experience is a personal experience. It isn't governed by religious law or tenet. Anyone can have them, and many people do. And as I've often said on this program, people, our spiritual nature, our spiritual sensibility is so powerful that we don't know what to do with it. And it frightens us, or we just don't understand it. So then, rather than mess with it, we either ignore it, don't give it much credence at all, or we turn it over to an organization that claims to know how these things work, and we just accept what they tell us to do. That's a way of not having to take responsibility for your spirituality, not having to engage with it, really. But journeys and encounters with psychedelics like these don't allow you to do that. In fact, that's one of the big things that it does in changing people's minds. It brings them face to face with that part of their nature. So now we're running close to the end of the show here. So, and as I said last week, this is probably going to be a multi-episode discussion about changing one's mind through psychedelics. But you don't need psychedelics to do it. Meditation and mindfulness, which is another one of our very favorite topics on this show. These are also ways of changing your mind. I did try LSD during my college years. I had some wild experiences, and they were spiritual. But I haven't needed really to use that to access spiritual experiences. Although I think if I did go back and take it again, they would be, the experiences I do have would be much more intense. Because basically what happens is the you that is defined, the ego you, the avatar that I talked about earlier, that you use to sort of as a vehicle through the illusions or the holographic realities in this world, gets stripped away, and you begin to let go of that and rise up to an understanding of the higher you, the truth of who you are. Which is why these things have been used as spiritual sacraments for centuries by shamans and others. So there's many ways to get at it, but if research can begin again to help people to use these drugs, and in a world where people seem to need to have drugs because there's such a strong belief in their efficacy, having psilocybin and LSD as part of that can actually, I think, help people. And these are the kinds of drugs that you wouldn't be having to take over and over again, or even on a daily basis, the way so many are. Which might be why, pharmaceutical manufacturers may not be all that willing to take this on, because they won't be able to make the huge kind of money they make from the pharmaceuticals that people have to take over and over and over again forever. It hits their bottom line, and that will definitely influence whether or not they will participate or fund further research. So let's go back now to it's been a while since I've been able to give you some wellness tips on this show, because this discussion has been so encompassing. But let's talk about another way that you might want to use to calm your mind, or at least get your mind into a space where you can access a meditative state. And yoga is always a great means of doing that. And so we're going to talk about a yoga pose that you can use And that has numerous benefits, including calming the mind and alleviating stress and mild depression, stimulating your abdominal organs, your lungs, rejuvenating tired legs, improving your digestion, and reducing anxiety, fatigue, backache, headache, and insomnia. And can also be therapeutic for high blood pressure, sinusitis, and other things. And this pose is called the bridge pose. It's very simple. It's one of the basic poses in yoga. Not very hard to do. And as you can imagine from the title, bridge pose, your body sort of takes the shape of a bridge. It's called Setu Bandha Sarvagasana in Sanskrit, which translates literally to a construction of a bridge. So what you do is you lie on the floor, and if you want, you can have a folded blanket or a yoga mat under your shoulders if you want to protect your upper back and neck. Then you bend your knees and place your feet flat on the floor and parallel. Now you don't want your feet more than a hip width apart. Keep your arms to your side and your palms on the floor. That'll keep you stable. Then breathe in, and as you exhale, you slowly lift your hips towards the ceiling. You're going to keep the knees and thighs parallel. You're going to engage the muscles of your lower back and your buttocks, thighs, and abdomen to keep the body taut and firm. And you lift your hips until the body is flat from chest to knees. And of course your shoulders are still flat on the floor. You keep your neck loose by lifting the chin away from the body, and that will also avoid placing too much strain on your neck. And you hold the pose for 30 seconds to a minute, and then you release. And as you exhale, you slowly roll your spine down, starting from the neck, ending at the hips, one vertebrae at a time until you're back on the floor. And then you can repeat the pose again once your body feels comfortable. So as you can imagine, a stretch like this, well done, can alleviate lower back pain. It opens up the chest and hip flexors. Well, that's something I found when I started doing it, how much more open my chest was and my shoulders, which I had been used to sort of not hunched, but my shoulders really holding them inward. And now my chest and my shoulders are much more open, just on a daily basis. And it started with using this pose. It's great for your abs and your core muscles. It improves your digestion, and your spine and hips get more flexibility. So you be careful with your knee and back and all of those things. Make sure that your shoulder blades are supporting your full weight and not your neck when you do this. Now, if you are just starting, you can keep your shoulders rolled under you so that you don't overstretch. You could also start with a yoga block under your tailbone to help you and alleviate any pressure you might put on your back. And as you get further into it, or you do it more frequently, you can deepen your bridge pose by extending the arms and placing them above your head with the back of the hands and arms on the floor. This gives you even more of a stretch, basically. And you can even lift your heels up off the floor as you go up, as you get more comfortable and more into performing this pose. But if you do have back pain or neck pain,